Greetings and welcome back to Room 303 and our Talks with Walt, as we are calling our readings and study through the deathbed edition of Walt Whitman's Leaves of Grass. I hope that you have your own personal copy of Leaves of Grass, and I hope that you have been annotating as we go. Here we're going to see the very heart of, many have argued, one of the greatest poems in Leaves of Grass, passage 6. What's fascinating is that Whitman would number this passage 6, and he would also number, of course, passage 6, Song of Myself, a child came to me asking, what is the grass? And of course, we'll consider Song of Myself's a kind of heart, maybe one of the hearts of that is passage 6. Many have seen passage 6 here as the very heart. Now, just to remind, we are moving now into the second movement, as many readers of this poem have called it, of passages 6, 7, and 8. Many see this as the most precious, some of the most precious lines. I want to go back, and again, the assumption is that you've been working with us at LearnStrong.net. Down the left-hand side, our Talks with Walt is the playlist. From the very beginning, you will remember that I gave the observation that we're seeing Whitman from a perspective of 5 different, and one of those is Whitman is pedagogue. We call the 5 P's of Whitman. Whitman is pedagogue, or educator. And go back to our study of Song of Myself, passage 46, to hear more about that idea. But here we're going to hear so much about that idea. Notice the immediacy of this section, number 6. 4 times the word now, 5 times the word here. That is to say, right here, right now, let's go to where we're going to think as well about the book of Proverbs in the Bible and the way in which wisdom is being celebrated in the book of Proverbs. And of course, Whitman's readers would intimately understand that. We're going to play the same game here. Let's just enjoy the language of this passage. Now, if 1,000 perfect men were to appear, it would not amaze me. Now, if 1,000 beautiful forms of women appeared, it would not astonish me. Now I see the secret of the making of the best persons. It is to grow in the open air and to eat and sleep with the earth. Here, a great personal deed is ruin. Such a deed seizes upon the hearts of the whole race of men. Its effusion of strength and will overwhelms law and mocks all authority and all argument against it. Here is the test of wisdom. Wisdom is not finally tested in schools. Wisdom cannot be passed from one having it to another not having it. Wisdom is of the soul, is not susceptible of proof, is its own proof, applies to all stages and objects and qualities, and is content. Is the certainty of the reality and immortality of things and the excellence of things. Something there is in the flow to the sight of things that provokes it out of the soul. Now, I re-examine philosophies and religions. They may prove well in lecture rooms, yet not prove at all under the spacious clouds and along the landscape and flowing currents. Here is realization. Here is a man tally. He realizes here what he has in him. The past, the future, majesty, love. If they are vacant of you, you are vacant of them. Only the kernel of every object nourishes. Where is he who tears off the husks for you and me? Where is he that undergoes stratagems and envelopes for you and me? Here is adhesiveness. It is not previously fashioned. It is apropos. Do you know what it is as you pass to be loved by strangers? Do you know the talk of those turning eyeballs? Now, there is so much going on in this passage, and Norton's will help us out with several of the words of this poem. First of all, at line 82, float. Here, Norton's will say, the flow to the sight of things suggests the flood or flowing of the appearances that provoke wisdom, call it forth, out of the soul. We'll cross-reference, of course, with line 62 of Crossing Brooklyn Ferry. And then just to finish this idea, Whitman as well would be, Norton suggests, aware of the meaning of float as the floodlights on the stage, for example, a flood of light. When we meet the word tally, Norton's is going to remind us that colloquially this just means added up. Sometimes Whitman used the word in the further sense to evaluate or to estimate. And then finally at the end of the poem at line 91, the word apropos here is going to mean, in context, appropriate, timely, maybe even we would say necessary. Notice now no pun intended, we will have 3 straight nows. Now, and again, this is why some have seen this as the second part, the second movement of the poem. Now, if 1,000 perfect men were to appear, it would not amaze me. Now, this word perfect is one of the most used words in all of Leaves of Grass. Students who have sat down and just read all of Leaves of Grass and just looked for the word perfect have been stunned at how many times it comes back again and again, right? The echoes we'll be paying attention to as we go. If 1,000 beautiful forms, of course, the moment that he ever uses the word forms, we have to think about our study of Plato's Republic. We've done much with it at learnstrong.net. Of women appeared, it would not astonish me. The notion of being amazed and being astonished, and then at the same time saying, you know what? Come to think of it, I'm not amazed or astonished that America is this amazing place with all these amazing people, or that the world is this amazing place with all these amazing people. Of course it is the case. It's only that we allow ourselves to be blinded to the most simple observations, like this world is peopled by amazing people. And we all have stories. And because we all have stories, we're all the stories that we tell or retell, decide to accept or decide, obviously, to reject. This idea from the very beginning is that immediacy brings us to this moment now. Now, he says it. I see the secret. You'll go back to our study of Among the Multitude with the word secret. The secret of the making of the best persons. Notice it's the making, it's the construction. Whitman is educator. You are the stories that you believe and that you live. And to that degree, those stories were presented to you. You are made through the presentation of those stories. The making of the best persons. By the way, this phrase, best persons, is only used one time right here, right? Whitman as pedagogue, Whitman as educator says, what is the secret? It is to grow, we know how much he loves that word, in the open air. Obviously, we've seen that already, and we're going to see it again in passage 8 of Song of Myself. And to eat and sleep with the earth. There's a really good argument that's been made in the last number of years that we could do a whole lot worse than going out, taking our shoes off, and walking through the grass and touching the earth. Going out in the garden, yes, and planting something reminds us of what obviously Longfellow says in Psalm of Life, dust thou art, to dust returnest, was not spoken of the soul. And he will say it. Here is the secret, here is the key. Of course, this notion of the secret, this notion of revealing the secret is central, obviously, to our study of Leaves of Grass, because so much is promised of what Whitman says he's going to reveal, and then often so little is actually produced. Final, fourth, or the next here. Here we go. Here, a great personal deed has room. We go obviously back to the notion or earlier of passage 4, heroic deeds, right? Here, a great personal deed has room. His idea of America, the notion of manifest destiny and exploration, obviously there's all kind of tragic ramifications for that, especially as it relates to the native peoples who were living out in the West, obviously where we are today in Wyoming. But he says, room, that's what we're all looking for, right? And we immediately, when we see the word room, we have to think about our Virginia Woolf, A Room of One's Own. We've commented on this elsewhere at learnstrong.net. And then notice this parenthetic that's going to be almost like an aside for us, right? Such a deed, again, this repetition of the word deed has to make us think about Goethe's Faust and the idea of the deed, right? Such a deed seizes. It's interesting, this notion of the word seize. Hey, do you remember this from Song of Myself, passage number 11? Let's just, you'll remember the 28 young men passages. Do you remember this one? Let's just play this game for just a moment, because I love this echo, because it's so much fun to kind of play that. Game. The young men float on their backs, their white bellies bulge to the sun. They need not ask who seizes fast to them. Notice here we're back to this word, this echo. I told you, Whitman loves these kinds of echoes, right? Such a deed seizes upon the hearts of the whole race of men. And again, this word seize will make us think about passage 1 of Song of Myself. We can play that game going even further, a little bit back, since we're playing the game of echoes. I told you guys I would avoid most of this, but some of this is just too good not to, not to play around with. So let's play the game really quickly. Creeds and schools in abeyance, retiring back a while, suffice that what they are but not forgotten. I harbor for good or for bad. I speak at every hazard. Nature without check with original energy. Notice how he's going to play around with that same notion again. Such a deed seizes upon the hearts of the whole race of men. Its effusion of strength and will overwhelms law and mocks, we're going to come back to this word in passage 8, all authority and all argument against it. Again, the line that we just read from Song of Myself, passage 1, creeds and schools in abeyance. There's almost like a parenthetical reference here to set us up for the next here, and of course the heart in many ways of Song of the Open Road. Some have argued this may be the heart of all of Leaves of Grass from the perspective of learning theory. Let's play around with it here. Obviously we're going to play around with the passage 46, 47 from Song of Myself. Here is the test of wisdom. Now, you'll remember in I Sing the Body Electric, the test of himself, same use of lines. Here is the test of wisdom. Wisdom is not finally tested in schools. Now, I see some of you smiling because, of course, that's happy thought. In other words, we mustn't think about our schooling as our education. No, 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 no. School is, of course, one element of our education, but it can't be our full education. And this thing we're going to call wisdom, again, taking us back to the New American Bible that Whitman's longing to construct. What is the book that follows the book of Psalms? Obviously, the book of Proverbs. So here we go. And what is it that Proverbs says about wisdom? Well, what is it that he says about wisdom? In the end, no. It's not about schools. No. Wisdom is not finally tested in schools. Wisdom, notice the repetition of 3 wisdoms here. Wisdom cannot be passed from one having it to another not having it, which is why he has to ordain himself loose. In other words, I cannot take care of setting you free. Now, as an instructor, I can help you. I can point you in directions. You'll remember it from passage 46 as we're standing on the knoll pointing. The teacher points the way. Not I, not anyone can travel that road for you. What is it that Whitman says? You must travel it for yourself. Such an important part of how you read Leaves of Grass. In the end, no one can give you the wisdom that you most and desperately need. Wisdom is of the soul. And we'll obviously be talking here in transcendental language with Emerson. Obviously, you can go back and look at all of our lectures on Emerson and Thoreau Walden, and this idea is going to resonate. What you need to know is there already. It's a matter of rediscovering, remembering. It's the way Plato plays the game, right? Wisdom is of the soul, is not susceptible of proof. Hey, do you remember this? I'm doing a lot of this with you guys, but let's play the game one more time. Do you remember from passage number 3, right, of Song of Myself? Clear and sweet is my soul, and clear and sweet is all that is not my soul. Lack one, lacks both, and the unseen is proved by the seen, till that becomes unseen and receives proof in its turn. It's going to come right back to this idea that there is things that you can't so easily, quote unquote, prove. And yet, look at the next line, is its own proof. You know that it's the case. When you meet a great idea, and you're somehow energized the way Keats talks about it in Chapman's Homer, right? Then felt I like some watcher of the skies when a new planet swims into his ken, or like stout Cortez when with eagle eyes he stared at the Pacific and all his men looked at each other with a wild surmise, silent upon a peak in Darien. And even though he missed his geography and it wasn't Cortez, it was Balboa, the point is still present. That there comes moments when you engage in an idea for the first time, as Emerson says in Self-Reliance, and it somehow changes forever. Joyce called it an epiphany, yes. It changes the way you see the world. There's the proof that you need. I've had students that pick up Leaves of Grass. Sometimes it's happened because they've read this line. And they're like, whoever wrote lines like this, I got to read some other stuff he's written. And they start picking up Leaves of Grass. And they go, you know what? He's absolutely right. All he's doing is challenging me to find within myself the truth that is undeniable. I cannot walk away from it. It is undeniable. As I said recently to a student who was telling me all the things that he no longer believed. I don't believe in this, I don't believe in this, I don't believe in this. And I said, great, now you know what you don't believe in. What do you believe in? That's what I'm interested in, and be exact. And he struggled. It's like, well, man, I haven't spent any time actually trying to figure out what I do believe in. I'm just going to tell you what I reject outhand. I don't believe in these things. Great, so what do you believe in? And once you tell me what you believe in, I'm going to ask you a simple question through Whitman. Do you live it? Do you live it? Don't tell me you believe in love and then you can't love people because you got all these problems with everybody. This is going to be for Whitman, see the proof. there's the key word, maybe the most important word in all of Leaves of Grass. If it doesn't actually lead to a well-lived life, then where's the proof of the idea of your wisdom? Notice he'll continue by saying that wisdom applies to all stages. Notice what he said again in passage 5 when he said, listening to others, considering well what they say, pausing, searching, receiving, contemplating, gently but with undeniable will, divesting myself of the holes that would hold me. Look at how he plays the game now. Wisdom applies to all stages and objects. Notice the use of the word all. And qualities, and is content. Again, back to passage 1, A Foot in Lighthearted, he says that I need no longer, I need nothing. Contentment is central to wisdom, right? We're constantly longing for the next thing. And Whitman goes, but is it real? Does it really make sense to constantly be struggling and longing for the next thing instead of learning how to be content with the things that actually matter to us? And then he says it. It is, or is, he just says is the certainty, but we'll say wisdom. Wisdom is the certainty of the reality and immortality. Notice the rhythm, it's beautiful here, right? Is the certainty of the reality and immortality of things and the excellence of things. And of course, we got to come back. By the way, excellence only used one time in all of Leaves of Grass, and is right here, which is again why some people say this may be the heart of all of Leaves of Grass. Think about the challenge of Republic 7. We've given full lectures on it at LearnStrong.net. There those individuals are sitting locked up in their cave in the darkness looking at shadows on the wall, thinking somehow those shadows are real until the emancipator, the educator, Whitman would say the poet, will somehow unchain one, of course a young one, turn him around, show him the fire behind and explain, dude, what you're looking at that you think is so real, shadows on a wall. Not real, not real. Let's go out into the light of real sun and let's figure out what actually is true. Go back and look at these lines again. It's going to apply truth, wisdom, to all stages, right? To all objects and qualities. It's going to be content. It's going to be certain of the reality and the immortality of things and the excellence of things. There is truth, and it does last. This is Whitman's point. And we absolutely know it if we spend any time actually seeking for this wisdom. And of course, Leaves of Grass for Whitman is going to be one keen way to get there, right? The notion that there is no truth is, as we've said in our epistemological study, right, is silliness. To say there is no truth is to posit a truth. To say there is no absolute is to posit an absolute, the performative contradiction. No, there's definitely wisdom. The question is, can you discover it? And then, of course, can you live it? Now, and he'll tell us how he gets here, right? Watch it. Here's his method. Here's his pedagogy, if we want to call it that, right? We'll get to more of this when we study Learned Astronomer. By the way, this notion of the certainty of things from the earlier line, we're going to come across this again when we do Brooklyn Ferry Passage 2, which is the poem to follow this one. It's exciting to go from Song of the Open Road to Brooklyn Ferry. Some argue the very best poem in all of Leaves of Grass. In Passage 2, he'll call it the certainty of others. We'll come back to this idea of certainty, right? Notice there is something he says in the float of the sight of things. This idea of perspicacity, insight. Outside, I see you sitting there. Insight, no, I'm not rolling my eyes in the back of my head. No. Insight, perspicacity, understanding. That is to say here, notice, the sight of things that provokes it out of the soul. I love the word provoke. It is one of the central words of Leaves of Grass. It's like being drawn out. And even though some of you now are sitting listening to this lecture going, man, I just don't want to accept this kind of view of optimism, this notion that there is something actually eternal, something immortal, and it's got to be something profound. I don't want to, and yet there's this innate longing, a desire to somehow find some meaning in a life that seems so meaningless. And Whitman says, oh, no. But here's the thing. It can't happen just in school. And it certainly can't happen because somebody gives it to somebody else. That's the point of the previous passage. I ordain myself, and I then am going to challenge you to do the same. Do you remember from passage 1 of Song of Myself? For every atom belonging to me, as well, belongs to you. And in that moment, we're then ready for the next set of lines. Now, I re-examine. And this is obviously the game we play. Again, we are the stories that we tell. We are the stories that we retell. We're obviously the stories we decide to accept, but we're also the stories that we decide to reject. And that process of rejecting happens through how? Well, here it is. Here's his methodology. Now I re-examine philosophies and religions. They may prove well. We're back to this idea of proof, yes? Well in lecture rooms. We'll come to this later in Learned Astronomer. They may prove well in lecture rooms, yet not prove at all under the spacious clouds and along the landscape and flowing currents. What are we going to call this? Experimental knowledge. In other words, whatever it is that you qualify, that you say, that you actually believe. It isn't a question of what you say, it's a question of what you live. In other words, do you actually live the thing you say you believe? If you actually say that you believe in love, the simple question is, do you actually love? Do you do it? Here he says, I have to re-examine the philosophies, the ideas, and of course, all of the religious ideas that Whitman says that he's been introduced to. And then he finally says it, on the open road, when one finds this epiphany, here is realization. We'll come back to, I sing the body electric Passage 9. You'll remember this exquisite realization of health, right? Here is realization, dawning. Like, oh yeah. I've had students that read this and go, this is what I've been looking for all my life. Somebody that challenges me to, okay, put it down in writing. This is what I no longer believe. Okay, fine. But what do you believe? And can you live that thing you say you believe? Right? So here is realization. Here is a man tallied. Now this idea of tallied, Song of Occupations, we're going to come back to it for the other time in passage 4. Counted up. In other words, challenged. This is what schools should be about. This is what your education should always be about. Challenging yourself. Do I really believe this? Epistemologically, ontologically, who am I? What do I actually know? And here, finally, we get the tally. He, back to realization, he realizes here